Our children are caught in the crossfire.
So every time you start thinking about it deeply, it just rips your soul. I buried my son,
Handguns are pouring onto Canadian streets.
It's supply and demand. It's been that way for years.
Neighborhoods are living in fear.
It's a big social problem.
This is Canada's real gun crisis, not the one everyone talks about. We'll reveal how failed strategies, laws, and misinformation are putting our children at risk and missing the target.
The stillness hints that something terrible has happened here. It's never been the same since the birthday party on an extraordinarily gun-violent weekend in Toronto when an 11-year-old boy was shot.
There was a party going on in the backyards of the two areas. Just before 1 o'clock in the morning, gunfire started to erupt. People start running. Ephraim Brown runs into this alleyway here in between the two townhouses. And at some point during the time that he's running, he ends up getting caught in the crossfire. And ultimately, Ephraim Brown collapses on the ground right in front of the townhouse door as he's trying to get in to get away from the gunfire.
July 22, 2007 was the day sweet, sensitive Ephraim Brown became another murder statistic. One of 84 that violent year in Toronto, and part of a sinister trend.
When I attended at the autopsy, the first thing I noticed was he's wearing Spider-Man underwear. And as soon as I saw that, that really hit home for me because, you know, I have a kid that's young enough that he wears those same type of underwear. How can this have happened, and why has this happened? And somebody really has to be held responsible for this.
July 22, 2007 was also the day Ephraim's parents went numb.
I'm not very far removed from that night or from him. Lorna just said on the phone, "Oh, Ephraim's been shot," and she dropped the phone, and I can hear her crying. I knew it wasn't a joke right off the bat. I ran over, was going to run to the ambulance, but the police officer stopped me, and I just seen Ephraim's foot in the ambulance, and kind of expected the worst because nothing was moving, and there was a big crowd, and everybody was crying and screeching, and when I seen Ephraim up at the hospital that night and his eyes weren't closed, that's when my soul left me. It hasn't come back. I buried my son.
As a country, we have spent decades arguing and debating about how to regulate guns in the hands of mostly responsible Canadians. We're still arguing about it. There are countless ways to debate this issue, and as many ways to spin it. Is it possible, after all those words and all that time, we're having the wrong debate?
When I say that we will crack down on crime, I don't mean that we'll crack down on farmers or duck hunters.
People don't use handguns to hunt. We've known that for a long, long, long time now.
I will never register again.
Gun control has become a polarized argument between those who don't think anyone really needs it in a modern society and those who believe it hasn't gone far enough.
Just write driver's license in there.
Most of all, it's become a battle of beliefs, except on one all-important fact. Gun deaths are going down, not up. Down. This is the graph all sides in the gun debate accept. It's the government's tracking of the rate of gun-related homicides in Canada since 1977, and as you can see, it's going down, especially murders committed with rifles and shotguns. This is why so many legal gun owners say they're being unfairly targeted. Rifle murder was dropping long before tighter gun controls were brought in 1995.
Gun laws are irrelevant. They just don't work.
On the other side, pro-gun control advocates look at the same downward graph and have a completely different interpretation, that tighter gun control works.
We want to retain the law that was passed in 1995. We want to update the list of prohibited assault weapons and tactical weapons. But apart from that, we're really focused on implementing the law that's currently in place.
But what about this line? These are the numbers of Canadians killed by smaller handguns over the same 30-year period. It fluctuates a little from year to year, but refuses to make any significant drop. No progress is being made in stopping handgun murder. In fact, a closer look at the statistics reveals that in 1977, less than a quarter of all gun murders were committed using handguns. 30 years later, that figure stood at 67%. So handguns are now used in 2/3 of gun-related murder. Now let's zero in on urban areas. 81% of all firearm homicides are committed with handguns. In rural Canada, it's 29%. Perhaps that's why each side in our gun debate can look at the same data and see different facts and arguments. They experience guns from different vantage points.
If you just use common sense, while controlling access to firearms does not eliminate gun violence, it reduces the risk, and that's all this is about.
Do you really think that licensing and registering hunters' guns or banning guns in Alberta, Manitoba, British Columbia will really have a big effect on the violent crime in Toronto? Use your common sense.
But here's where all sides seem to be gun blind. While we're arguing and fighting about rifles and shotguns, handguns are making their way into the palms of the youngest Canadians. Look at these statistics. These are cases involving youth aged 12 to 17 accused of handgun offenses, and they've risen steadily in the past few years. Since 2002, up 32%. This is Canada's real gun crisis. Handguns in cities and increasingly in the hands of the young. One last graph to show you, and it's a shock too. This is the American rate for homicides committed with handguns over 30 years. In 2007, 30% lower than it was in 1977. The Canadian rate is spiking in the other direction. In 2007, it was 46% higher than it was in 77. So Canada has its own new gun crisis. A surging number of our children in cities are acquiring handguns, and our response to it as a country is so far inadequate, ineffectual, or as we'll reveal, completely missing the point.
4 shooting deaths in 48 hours. One of the victims is an 11-year-old boy.
Mark the crime.
He died at a
the
birthday.
stuffed animals, the age of the murder victim.
Ephraim Brown was a child. The 2 suspects charged in his murder barely out of childhood themselves.
At the time, allege a fireworks fight turned bad. A boy pulled out a gun, and Jordan was shot once in the chest.
That same year, and just as horrifying, 15-year-old Jordan Manners was shot and killed in the hallway of his school. 2 17-year-old boys were charged in his shooting, the weapon, a handgun. In this high-profile case, reporters sought friends and family for reaction and found Jordan's cousin.
Do I have any faith in the police officers? I don't have faith in the police. I have faith in God.
Who calls himself Blackest Ninja.
A lot of people think Jane and Finch is just the intersection. It is an intersection, but it's more than that. It's a community.
Blackest Ninja is a product of Jane and Finch, perhaps Canada's most infamous gun-troubled neighborhood.
What you say, what your name is? Blackest Ninja. What kind of name is that? The kind you always remember. What's the zone that you bang? Jane and Finch represent.
He's a musician, and the music he records is about his home. He's grown up here, seen people live among guns, seen many people die by guns.
There's about 15 people in my lifetime that I personally know that have been killed through gun violence. It's not really shocking to me.
The day after his little cousin's death, he took to the internet angry that no one really understood why children in his neighborhood were dying by the gun.
Things happening here or whatever. Why don't we look at the economical situation? Why don't we look at the people that live around here? Why don't we look at the way the living is? Why don't we look at the finances? Why don't we look at the social programs? Why don't we look at all these things? Violence is always going to be around poverty. Guns are a part of violence. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out.
Blackus doesn't know how many guns are floating around his neighborhood, can't even hazard a guess. And that's the thing, no one knows. So we asked a young contact in Jane and Finch to photograph as many guns as he could for us, and within a few hours we were sent 28. Remember that number. It'll come up again later in a way that might shock you. But in a moment, how some of the proposed solutions to Canada's new gun crisis are coming up short. And those 28 weapons in the hands of children, they might have come through here. So many have, and no one seems to be able to stop them. When an 11-year-old is shot and killed at a birthday party, the revulsion ripples well beyond the murder scene. Ephraim Brown's murder was felt all the way to a remote town in Newfoundland.
The morning this happened, we were out in Seal Cove to my nephew's wedding, and my brother Gerald phoned me from Toronto and half on a cry, his heart broken, told me that his son was shot and killed. And I basically just dropped to my knees. We went from happiness to a wedding to a death. Then I was left with the task to go around and tell my sisters and brothers here in Newfoundland and the rest of my family that Ephraim was shot and killed. And it just about tore us right to pieces. I mean, that shouldn't be happening in our streets in Canada. It should not be happening nowhere, here in Newfoundland or Jane and Finch in Toronto. It doesn't matter. A little boy got a right to play wherever he wants.
Verdon Brown is one of those rural Canadians who grew up using and collecting guns. But after Ephraim's murder, he didn't feel the same way about his collection. He had moved beyond the old debate.
I'm a registered gun owner myself, and there is a difference between rifles and shotguns and handguns. Handguns are made for one thing only, to kill people. I'm anti-handgun, I'm not anti-gun. If my guns that I got now was a weapon of choice of criminal, I would turn them all in tomorrow. I feel proud about it. But we got to go at the heaviest and the serious part of criminals, and that's handguns, because you can conceal it. That's why it's a weapon of choice. And most of these criminals, these young punks in these gangs, wouldn't have guts enough to come up to me or you and face us. But if they can stand around a corner and stick out a handgun and just let bullets fly, they can do that. But they wouldn't have guts to come up and face me or you.
It wasn't only about rights for him anymore. It was about controlling the handguns that children are using to kill. So he started a petition calling for a nationwide ban on handguns. He can't see why anyone should own one. And an important man in a big city many kilometers away agreed.
When I got a call from David Miller's assistant, Sylvia, I was really shocked. I didn't even know who David Miller was. I'm going to be honest with you. When she told me he was the mayor of Toronto, I was lost on the phone.
I said words to the effect of whatever we can do. By we, I mean the City of Toronto and my office, and I, as mayor, will do everything I can.
I knew then I was getting a bit of support across the country. I said to myself, Ephraim, we're going places. You're going to be heard.
That we have to ensure anyone who has a gun is arrested and brought to justice and put in prison.
But what Toronto's mayor was able to do versus what he'd like to do shows how little is possible under current law. No city or town in Canada has the legal authority to ban a weapon. That's Parliament's role. So the mayor of the city where children are carrying more guns and using them more often could only outlaw their promotion on city-owned land. And that pretty much amounted to evicting a legal gun club housed in the basement of Toronto's main train station.
The City of Toronto made the moral statement that I want Canada to make, that we're going to do everything in our power to get handguns off the streets. And what we could do was we could get rid of shooting ranges in properties we owned. We could ban future ones. We could ban a number of things. We did it, but we made that statement, and it's the right statement to make. Handguns are designed for one thing. They're designed to be of lethal force to kill people. The gun ban's important because to make the city truly safe and make our country's cities truly safe, you have to get the weapons out of the hands of those that will use them, because guns are far too easy to use.
We need to stop this. We as a community, we all have to join together. It's not only about me. As a matter of fact, it's no longer about me.
On this fall Sunday afternoon, a group of families are joining together in Toronto to protest gun violence, united in their message and united in their experience. The tragedy they share is the loss of a child to gun violence. They commemorate not with a moment of silence, but with a moment of noise. Odette Shepherd leads the group. Her own son, Justin, was murdered with a gun at the age of 19, and no one was arrested. She knows where the real gun debate should be focused: on our youth.
Too many of our kids are being murdered. Too many of our kids are dying with these handguns. And it's not about the gang issue. Because it's not only a gang issue. My son was not in a gang. My son became a victim. My son had a future. He had a dream. He had a promise in life. And it was taken from him by a handgun, by somebody who decided it was time to end his dream.
These are the mothers who have lost their children to gun violence. And every mother, everyone who's ever been a mother, knows that when you carry a child for 9 months,
we are definitely letting our kids down, and we're letting down our children that have already been killed when we don't take action as a community. We need to come together and do something to ensure that our children's lives are preserved and that our children have the future that is promised for them.
we will not be silenced.
It is very important to maintain the gun controls that are currently in place. As a matter of fact, it's even important to improve on these gun controls, regardless of what the gun lobbyists have to say about that.
It's preposterous that you can take a law directed at people who are already obeying the law, have those same people obey more laws, and expect to have a different result. There are shooters from one end of the country to the other. They are everywhere in every demographic in the cities. They're in the country. They're hunters, they're target shooters, they're competition shooters. Sometimes they're just plinkers. They go out on a weekend and shoot some tin cans. We never refer to our firearms as weapons. A weapon might be a baseball bat you keep under your bed, but it certainly isn't those beautiful firearms that are in your gun safe, all locked up, safe and stored. The real issue here is we've got a gang problem in Canada, we have a drug problem in Canada, and when you mix those two things together, you're going to have a gun problem in Canada too. But going after legitimate target shooters and collectors of firearms is completely the wrong direction, but it is politically easy because you can identify those people, you can pass legislation that will hurt those people. Of course, you're not doing anything about your real problem.
But as we've shown you, handguns are where the real problem now lies. Verdon Brown has learned that even as a proud gun owner, it's dangerous to suggest a different debate.
Oh, I've got threats. I got emails on my computer. I got pictures cut out of the local newspaper with my head circled and mailed to me in the mail. I got a lot of backlash from the handgun owners, the people that have registered their handguns, went through the red tape and the paperwork, and they feel that their rights is being taken away. If the handgun is banned, they lose their handguns. And then we get into the conversation, well, why do you want a handgun? They simply say, well, I need it for a collection. I need it for target practice. I mean, if you can only save one life by doing that, isn't it worth it?
When Revealed continues, we know where the guns are coming from. So why are we having such little success in turning them away?
When a handgun is used to kill someone, science has come a long way in matching bullets to the guns that shoot them. It's now much easier to link evidence when you have it. But in many cases, the guns that kill our young, like Ephraim Brown and Jordan Manners, are never recovered. Those handguns are obtained illegally, which means the only way to stop children from being victimized is to try to get at the gun before it gets into the hands of someone willing to use it. And that's something we're not very good at yet. In all of 2007, 1,399 firearms were recovered in Canada and traced to the United States. 1,015 were handguns. Ontario recovered the lion's share, 701. We know the source for many of Canada's illegal guns is our neighbour to the south, but it's impossible to pinpoint exactly how many of them end up in Canadian cities. Guesses ranging from 50 to 65% are often used.
It stems really from the exchange, the guns for the drugs.
That's the criminal cycle. Canadian gangs send drugs to the U.S. for handguns, and it's been building for decades. So the U.S. Alcohol, Tobacco and Firearms Agency decided to crack down. They sent one agent to Toronto.
Since I've been here for now almost 4 years, there is U.S. source guns, and absolutely we look at why. Why is it? And I could tell you the demand here for U.S. guns is high. The demand for your drug organizations to be armed with U.S. weapons, it's supply and demand. It's been that way for years.
U.S. Officer Regina Lombardo has had some notable success with enforcement agencies on both sides of the border working together more effectively. They were able to target criminal organizations and increase the number of high-profile raids and sweeps.
It's a process from going reactive, where we're recovering a weapon, tracing it, to more proactive. And I think that's why you're seeing a few more of the major takedowns operations where not only is it Toronto Police and OPP and everybody working together to do the drug end of it, we're now bringing in the gun angle of it.
Today's operation has been of unprecedented scale. The conclusion of today's investigation has involved a highly coordinated and precisely timed execution of multiple search warrants across multiple jurisdictions by over 1,000 officers.
You can't possibly stop every single vehicle and do, a strip search of every vehicle that comes across the border. So the last few cases have been intelligence-led, and that's where we're getting the amounts that we are, the recoveries that we are at the border. Our top source states this year has been Michigan, Florida, Ohio, Kentucky, Texas, top 5. Ohio is one of our top source states. Gun shows, very large gun shows are held in Ohio, and therefore you have that I-75 corridor that leads you right into the Windsor Tunnel.
We're at Canada's busiest border crossing, the Ambassador Bridge. Last year, 7 million people entered Canada at this border crossing. Every American entering Canada is asked if they have a firearm in their possession, and only those who don't declare them will, of course, be arrested.
With the flow of traffic so high, it's impossible to catch all the firearms, but not even a good chunk of them are stopped. Consider that in 2008, at this, the busiest border point, just 28 firearms were confiscated. 28 in a year. Remember 28? That was also the number of handguns our young informant in Toronto took pictures of in only a few hours. Border agents aren't having much more success anywhere in Canada. In all of 2008, at every border crossing, fewer than 524 firearms were stopped. The West Coast stopped 191, the Prairie region seized 92, and the total Windsor area, which includes 3 border points, nabbed 89. No one knows the number that still slipped through, but Regina Lombardo's successful conviction of one illegal handgun runner suggests the number is enormous. In 2006, Ohio native Ricardo Tolliver was arrested as part of a joint Canada-U.S. operation called Bluegrass.
After Ricardo was arrested, he admitted to transporting and shipping into Canada between 200 to 500 weapons. We have absolutely been able to verify 85 of those for sure. We have recovered them in several crimes throughout the province of Ontario mainly. I feel kind of proud to say that we've sort of pulled resources from both sides of the border and worked this investigation to this outcome. And yeah, I feel pretty good.
Yesterday, Ricardo Tolliver, 33 years old, was sentenced to 32 years in federal prison. 10 people have been convicted. Mr. Tolliver was the last of the 10 people. They would either purchase the guns, smuggle the guns across the border, smuggle marijuana from Ontario back to Detroit.
These are the types of outcomes that we believe will help in this fight. If we look at the border as a little bit more transparent for law enforcement to come together to work, I believe that the shared responsibility and the outcome of these types of investigation is really the name of the game.
Tolliver alone admitted to smuggling more than 500 illegal handguns, likely destined for the streets of Toronto. Remember, only 528 were stopped in all of Canada in 2008. How many Ricardo Tollivers are there in all the United States? He's certainly not the only one trading guns for drugs. But after 4 years of hard work by authorities on both sides of the border, he's one of only a handful who have been stopped. In a moment, getting at the handguns young Canadians already have, we'll reveal how a city got thousands turned in. In a city like Toronto, where it's reasonable to assume most of the handguns are held illegally and increasingly by children, how do you encourage them to turn them in? Well, by offering to trade them for something they might want more. A program called Pixels for Pistols. Turn in your gun and you get a free digital camera, no questions asked. The offer was obviously targeted at young people, and several Canadian cities have been deluged with weapons.
In the 40 days this program ran, we received close to 1,800, 1,900 firearms, well over 40,000 rounds. Well over 40,000 rounds of ammunition, and I can tell you that some of the firearms that we received during this 40-week period is astounding.
In Toronto, 2,254 guns were turned in, 557 of them handguns. A significant haul, which hinted at the variety and number of guns in the city and the hidden violence many of our youth are exposed to. These programs produce compelling statistics and images, but do they actually work?
Instead of spending billions of dollars into handgun amnesty programs or give a computer or a camera for a gun, which gets a lot of guns, because if I have 6, I'll give you 2 for a couple cameras. The reality is that you need to work with that guy so he gets rid of all of them on his own.
Jabari Lindsay runs Toronto's only program trying to help kids leave gangs. That's right, there's only one. Efforts to shut down the gun trade get most of the public's attention and money, but we're spending little trying to educate kids on the physical and emotional harm they bring.
The pipeline is what we continue to talk about, of guns coming from the U.S., and we need to stop the influx of guns into our city, and we have to make sure that, people are safe. And when in all reality, the kids, they don't have anything else to reach for. The kids grow up, all they know is this. And they look outside of this and think that that world is not for me, this world is for me. If you see the roofs falling apart, all the shingles are coming down, the rain's coming through, people put in their requests for fixing, nothing happens. So as a kid, I grow up just feeling dejected. So that kid at 12, 13, 14, playing in the parking lot, hanging around doing nothing, he starts to hang around with the older guys doing nothing and gets past his first weapon, because this is our neighborhood and we have to keep it safe because no one else is going to protect us.
The gang exit program called Breaking the Cycle gives young people training in conflict management,
one-on-one counseling, and a new perspective on the choices they've already made and now regret. They express their personal journeys through artwork that hangs on the walls. Each story's unique, yet with much in common.
Tell me the quote and tell me how it relates to your goal.
The quote is, the difference between the impossible and possible lies in a person's determination.
My goal is to keep pushing myself, continue to being positive.
My goal is to make the next 6 months of my life better.
How do you do that?
I want to go back to school.
Basically, I was at the point where I felt like giving up.
My goals is, first off, I want to get responsibility for myself so I can get myself back into school.
If you live by the gun, you die by the bullet. If all you do is think about guns out there, so you're going to end up getting shot.
No one in the program wanted to appear on camera. No one, that is, except Leroy Coldspring. At 20, he's barely out of childhood himself.
His brother went through the program. He had a friend that went through the program. He's been around the peripheral of a lot of different gangs within the city.
It's hard. It's hard when you live in a world where it's like people already set your future for you or try to claim they set your future for you. And you know, like I like to educate myself when I was younger. I always educated myself, and I felt the fact that I liked it, I assumed other people would like it too, but apparently not.
The support that he should have gotten from the community that he lived in, he didn't get. And he made choices to survive. Who are you going to be?
I made a lot of mistakes in my past. I got arrested and stuff like that. I saw a lot of friends go, saw a lot of friends come. Like I have like a small circle now, and it's like I just too much things to deal with, you know. And I just wanted to get away from it all, so I came here.
How do you think you've come along since you started the program?
I came along a long way, you know. My relationship with my mom was on the rocks a little bit. And through this, I patched it up a little bit, and that helps. It always helps to have somebody, a foundation behind you.
The choices that he made to survive are some good ones and some bad ones. The bad ones, he to this day, 3 months in with us, he still doesn't really talk about.
I don't like talking about the trouble stuff. It'll put me back into where I was, the shell I was in before. So I try to think of the positive that came from the negative. I don't really know why they want guns. I don't really care what they do with their stuff. Just don't involve me in it, and don't involve nobody around me in it, because then you're gonna set me on a bad track, and I don't want to be on that track.
He's been around, he's lost friends. You're hard pressed now to find kids in the city that hasn't lost anybody to gun violence. And he lives with that trauma.
I heard guys tell me, yo, I'm gonna ride till I die. And then 2 weeks later, they died. Those guys knew what they were doing, and they said, I'm gonna ride till I die.
The problem is that youth today have been taught that they have no power. And the only time that they do have power is when they have a gun on them.
Jabari says keeping guns from kids is about retraining their perspective and instincts. The program doesn't keep statistics to know how many kids have turned away from handguns in the only program Toronto has. But Jabari is now starting a different program to estimate that number with the city.
The guns are gonna be there. But I think we've been successful in trying to help young people not choose those alleyways.
It's the pen is mightier than the sword, and all the information that is stored can't be ignored. I'm in the hood like Honda Accord.
Blackus Ninja is no social worker, but his views mesh with Jabari's. What he sees is that gun violence is the result of poverty and hopelessness.
It's a big social problem. It's not just an easy fix it, outlaw this and this is gonna happen. Like they put hundreds of thousands of dollars of cameras in the hood, in the area, and crime still happens. So it's not the physical things, it's the work you gotta put in, it's the minds we gotta change, you know? We're here to change and grow and develop minds. We're not here to just contain them.
If you living for nothing, then homie, you better die for the cause.
When we come back, the shocking call we received from Blackus and what it revealed about his past.
Unfortunately, I got shot on the 1st of January.
It's my time, there's no ands, ifs, or maybes. What you say, what your name is? Blackest Ninja. How the name is that? The kind you always remember.
Blackest Ninja raps about the life he's lived in Toronto's gun-saturated Jane and Finch neighborhood. He's known too many young people who have become gun violence statistics. Never thought he'd become one himself.
We can do it how you want it, call it all contenders. What you say?
He dropped out of sight for a while, until one day he left us this message.
Yo, what's up? It's Blackest. Unfortunately, I got shot on the 1st of January. And, I'll get back to you as soon as I can. I'm good though. I'm here. So, call me or I'll call you.
Blackest became a statistic, one of the first shooting victims of 2009. He says he wasn't targeted, but was a random victim of a random act of handgun violence.
I was going in the hallway to take out some garbage, and when I was walking outside the apartment, I noticed there were some people at the elevator. I heard right behind me the staircase door opening, and when it opened, a masked man came out and just started firing. And I got hit, and then I jumped out of the way, jumped back into the apartment, and locked the door and called 911. Altogether, probably about 5-6 shots were fired. I don't know what the person was trying to prove or who they were trying to shoot at or something, but I'm just happy that nobody else got hurt. All the years I've lived in the community, I've never worried about something like this, and this has never happened to me. All of a sudden, it was like, it's me now. So I think that it's just it was a wake-up call for me.
A bullet to his foot. No one charged and no weapon recovered. The only apparent consequence, Blackest's long and painful physical recovery.
The hardest thing was just going on the stairs and stretching it and just using my toes and, you know, doing tippy toes and stuff. That was the most painful out of everything I did, so.
How does someone get shot in the hallway of an apartment building, not know or claim to not know who did it? No one else able or willing to identify the shooter. Lack of cooperation, inconsistent information, misleading information. Those are the challenges that get in the way of police investigations and help perpetuate youth gun violence. Something Paul Warden knows all too well as the detective who investigated Blackest's shooting.
Blackest is the victim in this particular case. He was at the hospital, he was able to talk, his injury was just in the foot. He provided his recollection of what happened. Our concern with his story was it wasn't matching up when we later put it against other witnesses and the physical evidence at the scene. Didn't seem to match up with what he told us. Drugs and guns usually go together. It's not something Blackest led us in that, he did not lead us in that direction. He described this as a random out-of-the-blue incident. This occurred on the 10th floor. The shooter was waiting for him to come out of the apartment. And the apartment he was coming from, we received information through various tips and statements that there may have been some drug activity going on in that apartment. That doesn't seem like a random act to me. I believe Blackest was targeted, or that apartment was targeted for the activity that was going on there. And that was a concern to us during the investigation.
As it turns out, Blackest wasn't a stranger to police. What came out after his shooting was that Blackest was facing drug-related charges himself. Blackest maintains he wasn't targeted, has no idea why he was shot. But news of it spread quickly through the neighborhood, heard by the same kids who had been listening to Blackest's music.
Well, what does a 10-year-old learn when he, finds out about a shooting in his area, or especially an unsolved shooting? I strongly believe the community has to present some role models to help these young people see the big picture and understand that there are ways where people live good lives without getting involved in crime.
Blackus says he's aware of the big picture, knowing young eyes are now on him to see what he does next. The cycle of violence, he pledges, ends with him.
I am not gonna get any revenge on anybody, so I just hope that it just doesn't perpetuate, because we don't want to go to any more funerals. You know, we don't want to put any more young men in prison. It's like, it's not cool, because the prisons is not a cool place to be, and the grave is definitely not a cool place to be.
In Canada's long gun control argument, we have lost sight of what needs debating. When children like Ephraim Brown are gunned down, more often than not, the people charged are barely more than children themselves. The two charged in his death were both 21 years of age. Both were known to police. One had previous gun-related offenses, the other gun-related charges that were later dropped. This is Canada's real gun control challenge, protecting our children from seeing handguns as power, from obtaining them easily and then using them. For almost 50 years, we've argued over statistics and their meaning, using numbers to support belief. And while we have, organized crime has quietly built a flow of illegal weapons into Canada no one knows the size of. We've captured barely a handful of the people behind it, seized so few of the illicit weapons that it's barely worth the effort, and failed to meaningfully infiltrate or understand the largest growing market for them, Canadian children.
At the end of the day, we can debate from morning until night. We can debate about all the issues, about whether the gun registry should be there, whether it should be a ban on a handgun. The fact of the matter is, our children are dying. Our children are dying day after day, and we have to do something about it. This is not a political game. Our children are dying.